Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forbes Ignite live stream conversation series. We do this every week. My name is Gary Hilborn. I am the Chief of Staff of Forbes Ignite, and Forbes Ignite is the knowledge network and innovation coalition of Forbes Media. I'm going to hand the program over to our amazing moderator. But first, a little introduction of her. Her name is Amanda Ebokosia. She is a Forbes Ignite partner. She is leading our community engagement initiative, and she is the founder and CEO of the GEM Project. And we're just so lucky to have her leading today's discussion. So please help me welcome Amanda Ebokosia.
Thank you, Gary, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, my name is Amanda, and today we have a very, very important conversation about allyship as well as inclusion in the workplace. Today we are welcoming guests like Nim Sivakumaran, who's the head of CO, Shannon Schuyler, the Chief Purpose and Inclusion Officer from PwC, and then lastly, Reginald Miller, the VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion of VF Corporation. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest, Nim, who's the head of CO. Nim, you're welcome to come.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Nim. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's morning over there, right? It's 8,
yes.
8 a.m. Okay.
Yes.
Evening here in Singapore.
Evening. Good evening to you. All right. So this is so great to have you today about this important conversation about human connection and inclusiveness in the workspace. And so I want to give you a chance to really talk about your work at the CO before I discuss the first set of questions about what you're doing in regards to human connection.
Awesome. So CO is one of the earlier innovators of co-working spaces in Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. We're part of the Arc Spaces group of companies. So we cover Southeast Asia as well as China and Hong Kong. So really what we built the business on is, connecting people with spaces to connect and
yes.
really building community, hence the name CO.
Yes.
But the last, sorry.
No, go on.
I would say it's kind of been an interesting time the last few months with working from home in terms of still instilling that human connection, still instilling that sense of community whilst not being in a physical space.
Mm-hmm. And you really fostered, what I like about the CO is that you really fostered a collaborative environment that really focuses on bridging a lot of entrepreneurs and creating clusters of communities. And so as people and companies push forward into the next year and several years to either a hybrid or remote-based work or even on-site models of working, what are your thoughts or opportunities and threats as it relates to human connection, given in mind those different options that people are exploring today?
So I think a really interesting debate around the future of work is, how and where your employees are most productive, and they also have their greatest sense of purpose. So whether that's in the office, whether that's working remotely, or perhaps I think it could be a combination of both. Mm-hmm. But I think certainly these last 2 or 3 months, I've been speaking to some of our community, and they feel a little bit isolated in terms of lack of social engagement. And also, I guess, for the teams that are working within collaboration and creative projects, it's a little bit tricky. You don't necessarily get that sense of collaboration working remotely. So it's I think it's in progress, but I think over the medium term, people will go back to a space.
Yes, for sure, for sure. I think that is great is that how inclusive you are. And it's evident in the demographics of the CO. And what I find particularly interesting is that over 60% of your members at the CO, and you're thinking about these entrepreneurial communities, identify themselves as women from varying countries. What ways have you, in particular, have been intentional to foster this inclusive environment where women from all backgrounds can feel included and heard?
think it's a one particular approach. I think it's a combination. Firstly,
Okay.
I would say we got a fantastic team. It's not about doing an event. It's about the day-to-day engagement. So we have a fantastic community team responsible for that. Aside to that, it's also having a diverse content. It's not about focusing on a particular industry or particular group of people. It's allowing ideas to flow. So one of the big things we've been trying to push is creating that psychological safety for companies, whether they're from different organizations, where they can share ideas, where they can collaborate, and the community is just growing organically. So I would love to say it's all down to me, but it's not true. I think it's really been that collective effort that's created the community.
Yes, and I think that's so great that you mentioned that you're using several different approaches, right? Because as you know, you're also a partner at Forbes Ignite, and earlier virtual sessions, you were part of the cognitive diversity and different challenges in regards to that, and how important it is to really speak to different lenses, to bring more different perspectives when it comes to problem solving. So thank you for also being intentional of bringing that up. One of the things I know, and we spoke about this earlier before, about how important sustainability is core, as like a core value for the co. And thinking about sustainability, and it ranks high at your company. In light of recent events, many companies have been faced with insurmountable challenges. Particularly, I'm also thinking about Singapore and where you're at and you're also based in several other countries. And how this pandemic or this situation has affected you. And so thinking about that through this lens, how are you positioning yourself and your members to be sustainable? What do you see in the future of work globally and being done through this particular vein?
I think if we go back recently, there's been a big, if we look at the startup community specifically, there's been a big push towards growth at all costs or any costs. Whereas right now, given the current situation, it's all about liquidity. It's all about, sustainable, growing sustainably. So Co is part of the Art Spaces group of companies. So we've been going for 20 plus years in the region. So we're that sort of safe pair of hands where companies can grow, as their business grows. And at the same time, these organizations, they can, cut back on their real estate footprint, so that it works on both sides. But we're there to support companies to grow, in a measured fashion. So that's really what we've been focused on. And that's where the community comes in. Yes. So if a company is looking for support with a particular service or product, that's the job of our community team. We can look to connect them with a relevant business or a relevant partner. So actually, we focus more than the space. Yes. It's really in terms of looking at the individual or looking at the organization, and how do we support that company with their culture, with regards to attracting talent, with regards to growing.
Yes, and I think it's also important to drive home, also in the vein of allyship, when you're thinking about your large community, particularly of women who are at the Co. You have really fostered that environment where you identify the issues and barriers that exist within those communities, and you understand those problems, and you go into and we spoke about this earlier, before you really go in to provide services and support in a platform where they can have that type of focus. So I really commend you on the work that you're doing at the Co. And you mentioned before that you provide more than residential space. And I know that you spoke before about activating communities or whole communities. I don't know if you can just mention a little bit more about that before we bring you on another session again.
Yeah, so I think one of the the focus that we try and build is, it's not about the space. It's about for example, a couple of our locations there, smack bang in the middle of a couple of vibrant neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of activity happening in the neighborhood. So so that's where we sort of activate those connections. So it's really about human connection. So it's not about having an app. It's not necessarily about the actual workspace, but it's the human connection that can really promote or I guess put community as I'm losing my words now as a competitive edge for a company.
Yes.
So that's what we focus on.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that wonderful insight. And we're going to transition to our next session, but I don't want you to go away, so don't leave now. So we're gonna bring you back into one of our final sessions to have a really great talk on everything. And so thank you, Nim. So
Awesome.
yes, so thank you. All right, so I'm really excited. I don't know about you, but Nim really has put a lot in perspective in regards to human connection, what it means to be a great ally and pioneer. And so without further ado, I'm going to be welcoming two equally wonderful guests to the room, both Shannon Schuyler, the Chief Purpose and Inclusion Officer for PwC US, as well as Reginald Miller, who is working at VF Corporation as the VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion. So I'm going to welcome our two wonderful guests to the platform.
Morning.
Good morning. All right, so we moved from evening to morning in a blink of an eye. How are you all doing today?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
Yes, I feel very purpose-driven, and not to put a play on Shannon right now, but this is a very serious time that we're in, and it's not to be remiss in that particular mark. So I want to first thank you all for opening this space and important dialogue in regards to inclusion in the workplace and promoting psychological safety. And so I want to speak particularly right now to PwC's work. This particular first question is going to be directed to Shannon. And then Reginald, Reggie, I'm going to call you Reggie. Yes, you can also weigh in as well. But Shannon, I am very familiar with the work that you all have done, particularly at PwC, when it comes to the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. It was first founded by your chairman at a time similar to today, where there's a lot of unrest, racial injustice, and a priority that has been set for companies everywhere, individuals everywhere, to really lean in to having these dialogues about race within the workplace. So actually, I want both of you all to be able to weigh in on this. And so what are your top concerns when it comes to psychological safety amongst employees for those ill-prepared now and as well as several years from now for the future of work, right? And also think of it in the lens of what will happen if it goes unaddressed. And so I think this is a unique time that we're having, and it's an important time to have these discussions. So whomever wants to go first, Reggie, Shannon, I welcome you both.
Great. I'll jump in, and first of all, I want to say how proud we are to work with Reggie and VF in CEO Action. And so they are a very active member of that. And so certainly the roots of believing that the workplace is a place that we need to get right. And as you look at CEO Action now, there's about 1,000 CEOs that have signed. And so you're talking about that covering almost 30 million people. And so if we can get that right, business has a chance of actually being a significant part of helping society get it right. I think to your point, it was 3 years and a month ago that CEO Action was started, and it was started because of what was happening in Dallas and in Charlottesville and other places, and here we are again. And here we are again in the midst of 10 plus weeks of COVID, and you have the pandemic just showing more of the gaps that we have in our racial injustice that's happening. And so all of this has come together at this point. And I think what we've seen since really that January, February is the pain that people have, and certainly the mental health anguish of being put in your houses and not able to leave, and the terror that you would get a disease or your family would and somebody would die, and then looking at what the stats are and the disparities in the healthcare system and the results and how horrific that is and how that hits communities of color far more than white communities and what that looks like. And then you come into the last 2 weeks and see the additional hurt. And again, those things were happening for a long time, but how horrible it was when you already don't feel safe, both emotionally safe as well as physically safe. And so at PwC, we've really been focused on having those discussions. We're in the process of them this week and again next week. And what we learned from the first set of discussions we had 3 years ago is that people were holding things in that were so incredibly damaging to them to be able to say. I mean, we had Black professionals that were late, what was deemed as being late to client sites, and people just thought you were late and thought that people were lazy and would rate them that way. And we came to find out that those Black professionals were stopped every time they went to that client because it was in a white neighborhood. And they were humiliated to be able to tell their partners and their managers that they were stopped because they were driving while Black. We found this out, and the fact that people had to just hold that in and somehow, some way have all these things, but come and work harder and work better and, and be the way we wanted you to be. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that we need to create that environment where people feel safe to say when they don't feel good, safe to say that I need time away, safe to be able to share that somebody is threatening to them. Over the course of the last 72 hours, our CEO and myself have received over 4,700 emails of our people. And the good news is that they're reaching out. They feel safe enough to reach out. The sad news is we still have many people within our organization, especially our Black colleagues, that nobody has reached out to them. And so they don't feel safe because they don't feel seen. And so we've really looked at what is our role to play? How do we make sure that we do that? And how now we have a list of right now about 1,100 suggestions from our people. Okay. And based upon that, we've made different donations and crowdfunders. Based upon that, we've allowing everyone to take 40 hours to work for a racial or social justice organization. Based upon that, and later we'll talk about some actions CEOs took. So it's giving people a voice so they feel safe and we can make them safe.
Yes. And I know I just want to also throw this out too, because it's very important. Companies across company across the country to really understand the lens in which they operate, particularly what the power that can be provided to make people feel safe when looking at through the lens of allyship, and what does that look like? And I just wanted to follow up. I know there's an additional question, but I want to follow up. What is your perspective on allyship, particularly not necessarily being from the Black community, and how you are able to translate that type of support given the climate that we are in?
Well, and then certainly Reggie, jump in too. I mean, my feeling of allyship has really evolved. Mm-hmm. I think I have been in the past a very passive ally, where I would certainly support and I would have the conversations and I would be there, and have definitely come to know that that is really nice that as a white woman, I'm able to do that and kind of, jump in and kind of feel like I'm saving somebody and then leave. And now I really have focused on what does allyship really mean? Yeah. Not just the conversation, it means taking down the barriers. It means knowing that I have privilege that others don't, and using that privilege and that power to make sure others have the chance that otherwise they wouldn't have, and being much more action driven and not just there, right? And I think I started thinking it was about being there for someone to call, being there to reach out, being there. And now I very strongly don't believe that, and believe I need to speak up, and I can get into rooms and I have a voice that others don't yet have. And I need to make sure I'm leveraging that to look to people in a different way to allow them to advance, where otherwise within our racist systems, they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. And I really love that about PwC, particularly because you've really provided a culture that prioritizes inclusiveness. You provide a culture that really takes away this transactional relationship and instills trust, and which is very important. And it is the work that you're doing, particularly in the CEO Action Network of inclusion, diversity, and making sure that CEOs everywhere across the country, many of them are Fortune 500 companies, really prioritize how they engage with all people, all their employees, in a way that they are not just inviting them to this stage because of who they are, but they're also you're providing meaning behind their work. And so I really want to also just take a space and to welcome Reggie to get his insights. Reggie Miller, who is the VP Global Diversity and Inclusion for VF Corporation. And Reggie, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you a little bit more about your work at VF Corporation and what's happening in this climate, and anything that you can add on in terms of like what is on the horizon and how you're prioritizing diversity, inclusion, and allyship in this climate that we're in, as well as the future. Where do you see that? Where do you see it going?
Thanks, Amanda, and greetings from Denver, Colorado, where it's 6 a.m. But definitely happy to be on here with you. You know, it's interesting because I started at VF almost exactly 3 years ago, May 24th and 17 to be exact. And one of the first actions that we took was to join CEO Action, just because we knew it was important and we wanted to be part of a coalition of organizations that were really focused in on change. And so we really enjoy our partnership with the organization, and I'm glad to be standing up with them, especially during this time. For us, you know, it's interesting because not many people know us as an organization, but as I mentioned a little earlier when we were talking, many people know our brands in Vans and the North Face and Timberland and Dickies and JanSport and many others. And so I'll actually just quickly talk about what the last 10 days have looked like, because something was different. Immediately, something was different. And I think it was felt throughout the organization. And it really prompted us to really think about how do we want to change and be different, and how do we want to take an active role. I'll tell a quick story before I come back to the last 10 days. You know, when Charlottesville happened, I was still fairly new with the organization. And I remember that weekend I was, you know, emailing a number of different people. I won't call them out in any way, shape, or form. And so was our CEO. And we decided at that time that we weren't going to come out and say anything. Through the decision tree, that's where we ended up. But a couple weeks later, I was having my one-on-one with the CEO, and he said, I really wanted to say something. And I said, I really wanted to as well. But the problem was we didn't talk to each other. We let these other conversations happen in between us. And we made the pact at that time that if as situations happened again, that we would talk directly to each other. You know, fast forward 3 years, and here we are with everything that happened, obviously from Breonna Taylor to George Taylor, obviously no relation. And once again, it was just different. And so we had a number of different discussions and calls. And then we quickly had to activate not only a message that our CEO sent out to our employees, and then later on we posted, and then activations for every single brand. And that was very important as well, for every brand to stand up and showcase, you know, how we're going to fight racial inequality and racial injustice, And that wasn't just, our brands that were located here. We have a brand called Icebreaker that's based in New Zealand. And they are also standing up with us. We have a Napa Piri that's based in Europe, and they are also Eastpak, another backpack company that's also based in Europe, and they are standing up with us as well. And I think one of the things that we were able to find over the last 4 or 5 days, truthfully, as we've held a moment of silence for all that was lost over the last few weeks. We've had a number of different listening sessions where associates have been able to tell their own stories. I'm not sure if I've cried more at work in 1 week than I have this week. That it was needed for our employees to be able to express themselves, get things off their chest. And I think in some ways a lot, to Shannon's point earlier, amplified by the fact that many of us, if not all of us, have been working remotely, sort of confined into, spaces at home, and the whole Zoom fatigue of it all that's happened over the last 10 weeks. And so this outpouring of pain and grief and anxiety, but also love and healing has been something that has been amazing for not only our company to go through, our leaders to hear. And I definitely think it's brought us closer as an organization to saying, feeling is not enough, caring is not enough, posting something is not enough. We truly have to take action. And so our evolution from when I joined in May 17 to now is something that I know has been part of our journey, but will be an accelerated part of our journey going forward.
And Reggie, one of the things I would love to ask you, because what we've seen, which is different than 3 years ago, is the dramatic outpouring from our white majority to say, I don't understand. Like, oh my gosh, I'm outraged. I'm beyond myself. I feel shame. I don't know what to do. Help me to have the conversations. I mean, it has been so active in saying this is different to them. And I would also then say, to your point of 3 years ago, how many CEOs sent out messages, right? To now, I mean, there are so many messages that are going out from CEOs and white CEOs saying, this is wrong, and this is murder, and this is racism, and this has to stop. That's so different. And so there's so much longer and so much more that we need to do. And looking forward to working with people in CEO Action as we now take on public policy, which we've never done before, but that's their next step. But have you seen that too? Have you felt that difference as well?
Absolutely. I think that to your point, the genuine seeking to understand that we've received from everyone, but especially our Caucasian population, has been one of the revelations over the past week. And I can't count the number of personal messages that people have sent me, even as I've shared my story as well. I've tried to be very vulnerable during this week so people understood that it was okay, that it didn't matter what level in the company that you are, that you could still feel pain. And many of our brand presidents and even our CEO as well have done that too, because we wanted to set the environment and even the culture, for that matter, Amanda, of that it's okay. And this is a different time. And probably more than anything, we've had to pull people back, to be quite honest, because we're trying to pull together a coordinated effort that has the kind of impact that we wanted to have. And so you're spot on in saying that everyone has been super engaged. Now, to be quite honest, what our employees are saying is this sustainable? Is this just a flashpoint in time? And so we got to prove to them that this is going to be a long-term commitment. And we're obviously working on that, but it's been a beautiful thing to watch for sure.
I just also want to add another point, both from what I've heard from you as well as Reggie and Shannon, is that you both said that things are feeling so different right now. And I could not stress that enough more, because that's also what I believe. And I've been hearing a lot of this through various circles, not just business leaders, young people, commentators, that something is different this time around. And I think what we at Forbes Ignite, as well as other communities whom we've been engaging with, is really expressing the urgency of not letting up, right? Prioritizing this topic of inclusiveness, allyship, and support within the workspace, so that it can also bleed in personal lives, and so that we don't see ourselves in the same position a few years from now, or next year, or a day, or a week. So I really want us to like transition more and think about what it means to, in regards to how do we view diversity, right? What are our thoughts or philosophy around diversity and workplace outcomes, right? Because I think oftentimes people struggle with the inclusion piece. Sometimes companies who are ill-prepared in establishing a plan, because they may have an idea, or maybe some internal bias that they may have, that diversity as well as competency, et cetera, for whatever reason, are just exclusive, right? And so I want to hear from you all about your personal philosophy around diversity and workplace outcomes.
Yeah, I'll jump in first on this one, because it's been a huge topic for us over the last few months as we've been working on a new strategy. And so obviously when I walked in the door, I pulled together a strategy that was supposed to have a life of 5 years, but began last year really revising that strategy to really focus on the next 10, because I really saw 2020 to 2030 as a time, both domestically and globally, that was going to really be focused on change. And I did know obviously what was coming here in 2020, but I did see it as an inflection point of where we could drive things going forward. And to kind of talk a little bit about that strategy really quickly, what it was really focused in on is how do we really activate across the many different levels of diversity, activate that in a way that really engages the cultural differences, country norms, and sort of a one planet sort of approach to how we look at our own people. We're a company of 50,000 associates worldwide. About half of those are outside of the U.S. That I manage this on. And how we begin to, that's why I love Shannon's title, because how we begin to blend purpose, inclusion, diversity, and belonging into a almost synonymous effort is directionally where we're going. And so we're calling it our journey to belonging, but that doesn't just happen with people. We feel that journey to belonging happens obviously with our employee population, and how does that work through the entire employee life cycle, but it also engages brands as well, and how do our brands have more authentic relationships with communities around the world. And that's not just about putting some Black and brown people into marketing campaigns. It's about products, it's about services, it's about how we give money to causes. It's about all of it. And then lastly, really focusing in on the social impact piece, which is so appropriate, obviously, for the times that we're in now. And once again, didn't know at the time that we began to build this out, but to be able to drive advocacy, drive policy, drive things that are going to really have an impact on people's lives is going to be a really important piece. Now, quick aside, I also own VF's office reintegration plan as we go through COVID, and we had 7 offices open up this week, which was crazy. And then I also own our future of work strategy as well. And it all ties together, truthfully, how we look at what does the workplace mean for people? Are there any inequalities within that system? how we're able to obviously measure and account for productivity. I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I've actually worked harder over the last 10 weeks than I did when I was in the office, right? And truthfully, every day is Zoom meetings from sometimes, 6 a.m. to 8 o'clock at night. And so we also got to understand what that means for our employees and begin to prepare managers and supervisors for a life that truthfully will be one where your workforce will be all over the place, in an office, working remotely, maybe in Singapore like Nim, and maybe in Belgium. And I'll be honest and say I don't believe that our managers are prepared for that. And so when I think about diversity, it's about thinking about the holistic transformation that we're going through right now, and how as organizations we can prepare our workforce for it.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Reggie. Shannon?
Yeah, and let me build on
Yes.
a couple of things, but one, right now, currently our vacation levels are 80% less vacation has been taken to this point this year in comparison to last year. Our end of our fiscal year ends on June 30. So to your point, people are working harder. They don't know how to turn off because it's there in front of them. And certainly that's going to be something that from a mental health perspective, we have to figure out, because we are horrified of what that crash and burn will look like if we have people that do not take the time to walk away and reimagine what vacation looks like, right? So I mean, vacation has always looked like I got to go someplace, and we've realized that that can't be, because we don't know what this will look like. And so it's been a significant part of our reach out to people to say, you got to stop, like you have to take time away, which is a very different way to be in when you're focused on utilization and getting to clients. That's a different place than we typically have been before. But as Reggie said, I mean, one of the significant focuses when we look at diversity and inclusion, we're looking at creating a sense of belonging. We need to create a place where people feel that they can share their own identity, they can share their own story. We want to be able to leverage the topics of intersectionality. People don't want to just check one box. They want to be able for people to know their entire way in which they go to an engagement is different, because they have so many different things about them. So we're trying to create that culture where people can step in the way that day they want to step in, which could be different from day to day. So how do you create that ability for people to be able to tell their stories? And so we have a process happening where a site where people can tell their stories, their complexities and all that looks like, and to be able to share that and have them be able to match up with other people who have pieces of that story that otherwise they might not have connected with. Also, we want to be able to share that with our clients, because we believe that our clients want to know the humanity of the people who are coming and helping them, right? It's not just transactional anymore. This has to be more about that relationship and really having that appreciation of what it is. We really focus on this notion of inclusive leadership and wanting to make sure that at all levels, that's a part of how you're evaluated. Like, you have to demonstrate inclusive leadership along the board in order to progress within the organization, because a recent study that we did, the Wellbeing Learning Project with USC, shows that inclusive leadership drives productivity, drives progress, drives better outcomes for companies. And so when we look at our different engagement teams that are more diverse in all perspectives, they perform better. So yes, they also feel better because they feel connected, they feel meaning in their work, they feel that they have a purpose for being there and not just getting a check. So that's all important. But also we can be a more valuable and productive company. So these things should go together. And so we're really focused on how does that work, and how are we looking at all the different ways that we can create that sense of yourself being what you should bring, and having others really embrace that. And so together we can really create that belonging.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for both of you. And also Shannon, for really driving the important statement of knowing that diversity improves workplace outcomes. And it's not something that is made up is also driven by research, and is also important for people to feel like they belong in a space. And I'm glad that with the CEO Action Network and all that what you're doing is, it's wonderful to see that being prioritized, not just at PwC, but everybody within that network. We have the VF Corporation with Reggie Miller, who we just heard from, and just to know that thousands of CEOs are in the kind of like the stream of prioritizing this. And I look forward in seeing how this will continue to mature across the country and world. So to that point, what do you see, both Reggie, Shannon, where do you see the dynamics of the workplace changing the most to create more equitable spaces? And I'm not just talking about your wonderful companies here. I'm talking about the world, right? The world is watching. Everybody's watching across the nation right now what we're doing. And say hello to your daughter, wonderful cameo. But everybody's watching right now. So where do we see the workplace dynamics changing the most?
Go ahead, Reggie.
No, ladies first.
So good. Well, one of the things that I've been at PwC for 24 years. We've never said, all right, it's time for us to get into the public policy space, other than the things that we would normally do connected to our work with the SEC and PCOB and different organizations. And we are now saying that is our role. Business has to look at what is our role. And I think one of the exciting announcements that was just made yesterday or the day before was that CEO Action, we will work and we will fund the ability for 1,000 employees to be seconded for 2 years. PwC is sending 30 of them, and we're looking for other companies within CEO Action to send more, to actually work on public policy for social justice. What are we going to do to not just make donations, which is great, and we should continue to do it, but what is our role to play in making sure that those spaces internally stay safe? And we believe that the only way to do that is society has to be safe. We can be that safeguard once somebody gets here, but unless we can actually change then where they go from there, it's not going to be a full complement of how truly we can change society. And I think that's different. And I think having employees be a part of organizations that are saying, we're not just here to have you do your work. We are here to actually be a part of societal change. And when you talk about purpose and you talk about belonging, that gives someone purpose. And I really think that organizations are looking for, how do you create those spaces? And I think even the word spaces is so challenging, because I know as companies, look, we have about 55,000 people within the US and 90 offices. I don't know how many of those offices will be opened. We're talking now about who might never go back to the office, right? What will that look like? And we have clients that have said, we don't want you to come back for 2 years until there's other things that are happening. So I think that whole notion of space, we're going to have to look at, what does that mean? Because it also can't always be, somebody's living room. So I think that there's a lot that's happening within that and will continue to evolve.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with Shannon as well. I mean, even when I look at our purpose, our company purpose, we power movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and the planet. That's our company purpose. That's the lens by which we should be looking at everything. And I think it really aligns with what Shannon said, where there's just going to be an expectation of the workforce that once again, just coming to work and getting a check is not enough, that they want us to be active and being part of the change, not just domestically, but for the world. And then to the flip side of that, once again, just echoing her point, because I don't disagree with anything that she said. How we even define roles is going to be something that's going to fundamentally change. Not only as technology continues to improve, not only as the global marketplace continues to grow and expand, but also with the fact that the war on talent is out there, and we're still trying to find where the right spaces and the right hubs to find those difficult to fill jobs, right? And whether it's in digital and technology, whether it's in design, whether it's in a variety of different functions, those people sit anywhere, to be quite honest. And although from a global perspective, there are a lot of different barriers to whether it's laws or how the company is taxed or a number of different things that may sometimes inhibit our ability to go after that talent. We're going to need, as organizations, to dig deeper to find the person who maybe has that unconventional set of skills, maybe was an entrepreneur, maybe sit in Italy when the job is based in the US, or sits in Singapore and the job is based in Belgium, to really figure out how it can best support the company and best support the global marketplace. And so I think there's a lot of things for, chief diversity officers or CHROs or even CEOs to figure out, to really think through truly what the next 20 years of the workplace looks like. And to be quite honest, it's an uncharted time for us right now as we try and both manage through the short term of COVID and everything happening with racial inequality, while at the same time trying to look 5-10 years in the future to what is an employee going to want in 2030.
Wow. So thank you so much, Reggie. But we're going to go head off and take a trip right now back to Singapore. So I want to bring, you're going to all stay here. You're going to stay here, but I want to also bring our wonderful guest, Nim, who's head of the Co, back into conversation. Hey, Nim, how are you? Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. I was enjoying the conversation. I was busy taking notes.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah, this is gold.
This is a great segue because I'm really pumped up. I'm really inspired. And it's great that Reggie also was started to talk about a lot more about the global lens. And before we get into our last question, I do want to provide some space for you to also talk about not just like what's happening in Singapore, like where you are also based. Like, what are you doing to provide that human connection with all that you are bringing? Because you, particularly with the Co, you foster an environment that has really transformed and provide clusters of entrepreneurial communities, one of the largest entrepreneurial communities in Southeast Asia. So please speak on that a little bit more as you think about some other driving passions that you have leading this movement.
I think there's two things. It's the short term, and then we've got the medium and long term. I think in the short term, everyone is kind of cooped up in their home. I'm getting slightly bored from talking to my sofa and fridge. They don't really talk back. So I for one, I'm looking forward to going back to the office. But I think if we start looking at the medium term, it's quite an exciting time for innovation and how people are working. Certainly the industry that I'm in, flexible workspace, we will see some form of, I don't have the answer, but I think we'll see some form of mixture between both. So it's interesting to see companies now adopting a hub and spoke model with their workspace solutions. And I think the other good thing with regards to human connection, it's how companies are putting why at the core of their purpose. I think like we were saying, it's not so much transactional now. It's about giving your teams that sense of purpose. So that's really exciting to see.
And Nim, I would think that I don't think we ever would have thought that suddenly we have 277,000 people across the globe, and all of them at a certain time together were working remotely, and we're able. As much as we would have said that's impossible, we actually have to be at the client site, we're going to have to meet together to do propose, all this stuff, it's worked. And we have to figure out what part of that to keep that we don't lose. I mean, as somebody who traveled 90% of the time, I just was, I don't know what to do with myself. I now have time. I don't have to get up at 4 in the morning. So there's so much of that I would be interested in what you're seeing that we got right. And shockingly, I don't think people think we could. And how do we make sure we don't lose some of that while knowing we have to get back to some more of that humanity and the connections?
I think it's a bit of a tough one because we're analyzing based on a pandemic. So if people were working from home and they had the ability to go to their coffee shop or meet clients or friends, I think it would be a different form of experience. I'm finding that I'm more productive working from home. The flip side of that is that I'm losing track of days. So I've been working on weekends. I've been working, burning the midnight oil. So I think that's probably, I think it's about creating that work-life, boundaries. I think that's the challenge. But certainly in terms of, being productive, so, working from home, ticks a lot of boxes. I find, however, that, if I'm working with my innovation teams, I need that face-to-face. Maybe I'm a bit old school, but a Zoom video doesn't quite cut it. So I'm looking forward to actually how companies adopt both, really, yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something really quickly, because I think, Nim, you're spot on. One of the conversations I was having recently was just the fact that how important the morning and evening commute was, right? And I didn't realize how much it was important to me because it gave me an opportunity from a mental perspective, from a psychological perspective, to switch hats. Okay, even if I'm taking calls on the drive home, I'm switching hats from, work to, husband and father and things of that nature. Well, when you don't have that 30 minutes or an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it is, and it's just the walk upstairs to, obviously, have those conversations, it's a little different, and you don't necessarily always have the same personal time or space, right? That I had to realize over these last 10 weeks and get adjusted to as well. But another point I'll quickly make, going to Shannon's point a little earlier, is, and in your point as well, Nim, is that in a lot of ways it was a shock to the system, how quickly we had to switch from our, quote unquote, normal way of working to all being remote. And I would say for our leaders, for sure, and I'm sure other leaders in other companies, I think some are still believing the dream that we're going to go back to that normal. And so, there's this perspective that we're trying to work through as well, that really says, we know there is a future of work. We know things are going to be different, while at the same time, what does our executive leadership team have an appetite for, to be quite honest, both in the short term and the long term? And that is a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, I think feedback that we've been getting from clients, with managers, is that they don't see their people, and they don't know how to tackle those situations. So I think, both managers, and executives are looking at, okay, how do we adapt to the new normal? But I agree with you. I think there's two groups of people. There's one group that are just, let's wait and see. And then there's another group of people say, hey, this is a brand new world. So I think it'll be somewhere in the middle.
Yes. So I think this is a great segue. Just in about a bite-sized chunk, what are you all most excited about within your industry and for the future when it comes to allyship, inclusion, diversity, and purposeful work? Just one, like less than a minute.
I'll start. And today is an incredibly special day at PwC. It's our partner promotion day. And this year we will be welcoming in 232 partners. 50% are women and racial minorities. And I'm incredibly proud of that. That is an incredible journey, and we are not close to being done. And I can't have thought we would have been here a handful of years ago. So I'm incredibly passionate and excited, and congratulate all those partners.
I'll jump in quickly. Just being honest, we're an outdoor industry company, and typically this is the first time I've worn a collared shirt in months. We're a hoodie and t-shirt sort of company, but the outdoor industry has been historically focused on the Caucasian male. And so our ability to help lead change, to diversify the outdoors and diversify the outdoor industry is what I'm most excited about.
I think for myself, it's with, with community building and human connection, certainly from what's happening in Asia, we're seeing the narrative changing from I to how do we get through this together. So it's nice to see people being vulnerable, having those conversations, being human. Sounds a bit cliche, but so I'm really excited about that.
All right. So I just wanted to say a few things. You all have really provided so much wealth of information into this space. I feel like we have left here with some tangible next steps to consider. By no means this conversation is not ending. So on behalf of Forbes Ignite, I just really want to take an opportunity to thank you, Nim Kumaran, as well as Nim Sivakumaran, as well as Shannon Schuyler, Reggie Miller. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing your whole selves in this space and also your vulnerability within this space. We could not thank you enough. I know that our Forbes Ignite community are truly, truly proud. So thank you for making this such a meaningful event. So without further ado, I just wanted to say, as we close, for those of you who are watching, try to make an intentional effort to really engage your staff, your community, your friends, your colleagues in a way that leads with vulnerability, in a way that leads with intentionality. And we do that by listening, and we do that by paying attention. And most of all, we do that by not letting up in this very important conversation, no matter if you're a woman, no matter what you believe in, no matter what your background is, that this should always be at the forefront of our minds. As we walk in purpose, no matter where we are in our spaces, that's what we should be doing to provide a better world, a better place to work. So thank you. Thank you all.
And on behalf of Forbes Ignite, I want to say thank you to Amanda for leading such a lively, informative discussion. Thank you to our guests for making time to join us this morning, and to our viewers, please join us again next week. Thanks.